Get this started. All right. So I want to officially welcome everybody and thank you for joining us today for our webinar, Defeat AI-Powered Cyber Attacks. This is a very hot issue in the world today, right? And so just a few housekeeping rules and tips here. Number one, just as a reminder, your cameras and microphones have been disabled. And this just gives us an opportunity to keep the focus on the presentation. However, if you do have questions, we do want this to be an interactive webinar. So I would encourage you to utilize the Q&A function. Depending on what version of Microsoft you're on, it's either at the very top of your screen, it'll say Q&A with a little question mark icon, or sometimes depending on what you're using device-wise, it might be down at the bottom of your screen. So go ahead and click on that Q&A button, put your questions in there, and we will answer them as we can throughout the webinar. This is being recorded and will be emailed out to everybody after the completion of our webinar today, so you will have it to refer back to share with friends, and just to have this content with you forever. So without further ado, I am going to kick things over to Gerald McMichael, President of McMichael Insurance, and he is going to get us started.
Well, hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us on our Value Beyond Insurance webinar series. This is an ongoing webinar series that we present on different topics, from everything related to HR, cyber. We've got the privilege of partnering with Excelis Technology on most of our webinars. Glad to have them on board. On the call today, we've got Brandon Bergen. He's the Chief Technology Officer with Excelis. And we've also got Michael O'Neill. He's the Director of Sales of Excelis. And finally, we've got from Barracuda, Consulting Solutions Architect Thomas Dowsley. So glad to have you guys on board, and appreciate everybody tuning in. At this point, I'll send it over to Brandon and Michael from Excelis to give their piece of the webinar. Thank you.
Thanks, Gerald. Hi, guys. I'm Mike. I'm the Director of Sales here at Excelis. I've been here for about 15 years. So Brandon and I work with Barracuda and other cybersecurity vendors. And our company specializes in IT management, cybersecurity, and Microsoft Cloud, with an emphasis on manufacturing and then some financial, legal, and nonprofit. So, today's webinar is, we think, really germane. With the explosion of AI, there are some new threats out there that make it really dangerous to try to stay in business. We live in a time of unprecedented external threat, and how we do IT has to change a little bit in light of some of those new threats. So we'll talk about some of those threats and what you can do about it. And our portion will be about 15 minutes. Should be pretty fast-paced, but obviously just toss in the questions in the Q&A and things like that, and stop us at any time. Brandon, is there anything you want to add?
No, I'm looking forward to being able to show everybody a little bit about how they can protect themselves. I mean, this room this webinar is filled with people that the type of demographic that we work with every day, and we see these things on a day-to-day basis. So anything we can do to help you be more knowledgeable about it is our goal today.
Yeah, and I think a lot of our clients are multi-generational family businesses, and so we just try to emphasize to them, like, how are we going to get this thing passed down to the fourth generation, the fifth generation? So we'll hand it over to Thomas. Thomas is an expert in cybersecurity. He comes from Barracuda, which is an expert cybersecurity company for the small, medium-sized business space. So Thomas, thanks for coming and helping us out with this presentation.
Yeah, absolutely. Happy to be here today, and appreciate the warm introduction there. And yeah, just a little bit about Barracuda. So a lot of people know about us, those that may not. So we're a worldwide leader when it comes to cybersecurity solutions. So we have around 20 years experience in the industry. We offer a platform that protects clients from anything from email protection, data protection, over to endpoint protection, and a whole lot more. But we work with great partners like Excelis to deliver IT to customers in an easy and consumable way. So looking forward today to walking you through some of the current landscape, especially around AI, what we're seeing. And yeah, we definitely welcome to keep this. I know there's no cameras, there's nothing right away interacting, but conversational as possible through a Q&A, and we'll try and address all the questions. So moving on, getting into things, I'll just take control here. So wanted to start with this slide. It's a pretty crazy slide when you first look at it and you really read into what's being described here. Cybercrime is almost double the GDP of Germany and Japan, which, for example, they're two of the largest producers of automobiles. Cyber really crime with the GDP is growing 3 times as fast as the leading revenue producing country in the world, which would be India. There's a lot of new things going on with cybercrime. So cybercrime as a service, for example, we're seeing a growing trend where hacking tools and services are being sold to even less experienced cybercriminals. It offers anything from DDoS attacks to ransomware kits, allowing really anyone with enough money to launch cyber attacks without technical expertise. So it's something that's it's pretty crazy, just the evolution we've seen in the last couple of years. And we're even seeing cyber criminal organizations offer their employees things like healthcare benefits and a lot of other things a typical organization would. So it's really a new business, and it's growing fast.
Yeah, and just to interject there for 1 second, but if you look at that $8 trillion GDP, like that's entirely focused on ruining your life and stealing your money and walking into the church and taking the poor box. Whereas, like if you look at China's economy, like certainly a portion of that is spent on hacking American companies, but nowhere near the whole amount. But so it really is. It is just kind of like shocking how big of a threat. There's like imagine like a whole nation, all it does, it's almost as big as China, all it does is try to ruin your life. And that's kind of what you're up against.
Absolutely. And it's only going to keep increasing. We'll see cybercrime getting closer to America. So crazy stuff. But yeah, hey, moving along here. So some of the attacks that we're seeing, things that are on the rise, we're seeing a big increase in, for example, a lot of the folks on the line here I know are would be considered what are in the SMB market. You really hear about all the time on the news that it's big corporations, governments that are being targeted, but SMBs are really increasingly becoming a target because they're often weaker in their cybersecurity defenses and more vulnerable to these attacks. And that's why we partner with folks like Excelis, and we offer solutions that can help the SMB market be better protected. But in this slide, really what we're seeing is just the sophistication of hackers increasing. Things like, some of the other trends we're seeing is the rise of cyber insurance, which we'll touch on a little bit later in this presentation. But it's, there's a lot on the rise here, and I don't know, Michael, Brandon, if there's anything that stands out to you guys on this area.
Pull out that next slide. I really like that in terms of like some of these ones like double, triple extortion. Oh, that's my favorite. So like if you don't have logs, for instance, like if a hacker comes in, the first thing they do is they have the broom behind them. They cover up their tracks. So if you don't have a logging solution in place, then they'll make you pay the ransom to get all your data back. And then a couple of weeks later, they'll come back and they'll do it again, And so like with the rise of AI, and we'll get to it actually in the next slide, you'll get to visualize just how bad the problem is getting. It's like it's always been bad, but over the last like 3 years in particular, it's just skyrocketing. And Brandon, it's coming down river too to small, 5-person business, 2-person business, 3-person business, no problem at all. In fact, you might tell them just real quick that story of that small company that called us about that one hack that happened recently.
Yeah, it really does not matter how big you are. They don't even care. And one thing before I get into that story is the one thing I always hear from people is, well, why do I don't have any data that they'd be interested in. Why would they care about my data? And they don't care about your data sometimes. Sometimes they do, but if they don't care about your data, they care about crippling you to the point where you have to pay to just be able to work again. So that, because they can do that, and they can make it so you are unable to work. So that's where the challenge is. So, like in this case that Mike is talking about, a small 3-person company, but a pretty hefty revenue, had a lot of good old friends that he's been doing business with for years and years. And they keep bugging him about payment, and he's like, well, oh man, this guy has never really bothered me about payment. So he goes to the bank and he wires the money, and his particular insurance, it wasn't Gerald, through Gerald, but they would not pay because he voluntarily did the wire transfer, although he was tricked into it and so forth. But basically, what it was an account takeover of his email. And then what they do when they do that is they get in there and they're watching the emails go back and forth. They understand everything about it. And then what they can do is they can spoof and they create accounts to mirror the person that they were talking to. And then they create a rule to make the real person's emails filter out and go someplace else so they're not seen. And then they can go in there and they can say stuff like, you're late on your payment, or we're going to have to, sever ties. And by the way, we changed our routing number on our bank. And you'd be surprised. People do it. I've seen it happen several times in different ways. There's a lot of different tactics out there. And the key thing about this story is it doesn't matter if you're in Nabisco or a 3-person mom and pop shop. It does not matter. With AI and the way hackers can hit many companies, they can just hit 1,000 20-user companies. It will be the same difference as hitting a big company.
Great point, and a very relatable story. I hear these all the time, and I think one thing to touch on as well is the use of cryptocurrency now makes it hard to track the bad actors, and they can come back, like to Michael's point, and do this again and again. And for the SMB market, they're often giving a crypto ransomware that is payable. It's expensive, but it's something that won't completely crash you under, so that you're, in their eyes, that you're willing to pay it. And a lot of people end up needing to pay it, unfortunately. But yeah, moving on. I know, Michael, you mentioned you like this slide.
I love
So
this.
this is
I love
the
this slide.
I mean, it's pretty crazy.
If you look at this, it's just skyrocketing. And that's like Q4 2023. You can rest assured it's the upward trajectory is pretty much exponential. But with the launch of products like ChatGPT, anybody can be a hacker. So like you are friends in this meeting, Gerald, myself. We could become a hacker because you don't need to know how to write the code anymore. Now you can really truly access consumer grade products that can just write the emails for you, write the code, write the malware, and run a lot of this for you. And so because of that, the barrier of entry to become a hacker is so much lower. A lot of people historically were like, man, oh, I'd be a hacker. Oh, I'd go walk into that church and steal that poor box. I just, I didn't have the opportunity. Now they have the opportunity. And because of that, the world has become, a more dangerous place. Obviously, with AI, there's so much opportunity for good. And so part of what Thomas is going to present to you is how do we use good AI to defeat the bad AI? But yeah, I think it's an impressive chart to look at.
Absolutely. And it's a specific area that I know you folks over at Excelis are highly recommending all your clients have when we're talking about impersonation protection. So definitely relevant in today's time. So yeah, moving along here. So we're saying nowadays, that this is where it lands us. It's attackers do have the upper hand. And in order to combat this, we need to constantly be evolving our products, the protection we offer, while at the same time, informing everyday customers of the need for protection. So I think I alluded to it earlier. SMB market may not make the news on cybersecurity attacks, but it is a prime target. It's something we're seeing. And Brandon, Michael, any thoughts? Any thoughts here?
You have to be right 100% of the times, and they just have to be right once. And when they're right once, it's just like September 11th. They fly a plane into your building. So it's very serious.
Absolutely. So yeah, moving along. So what does AI mean for security? It means quite a few things. I mean, it's clear it's giving the bad actors more capabilities, from better phishing emails, better video and voice impersonation, we're seeing that in the, we're seeing that even in the news a lot with like fake celebrities, even politicians, and saying things they didn't actually say. But it's something concerning. But at the same time, even the good guys, we need to be very careful how we use data. Something I'm seeing is a lot of internal companies are adopting AI policies where employees, they're going to set standards around what employees can share with AI, such as ChatGPT, because a lot of that information can then be exposed, secrets can be leaked. So there's really a lot, there's a lot to unpack around this area. But I don't know if you guys have any other thoughts around this side.
No, I think I like the next couple of slides here, which is going to really kind of bring it home. So if you move forward to the AI generated attacks, so like it used to be, if you were careful, you could really catch the attack. And like to be clear, like all of the people on this call, ourselves included, if we're going to be ransomed, if we're going to get attacked and hit really hard, it's almost always going to happen through the inbox. 94% of malware attacks started as an attack to the inbox. And so, but the issue is like before it used to be like, sir, madam, we are calling, we need, the gift cards. It was really bad. It was broken English and things like that. Not anymore. Now it's really sophisticated. And because there's more information online about what people do and your vendors and yourself, it's a lot more targeted. And so, with LinkedIn connections and different ways they can impersonate, it's very dangerous. So if we move to the next slide, just think about, what happens with ChatGPT. You ask it to write you some malware, and of course, it's got those guardrails in place, right? Oh, I can't help you with that. Or in the election, they would say, oh, I can't give you election information. Very good. But then all you have to do is modify this script just a little bit. Okay, so just imagine you're a typist dictating the words about someone trying to, ruin someone else's life. What would you do in that situation? And before you know, the output is right there for anyone to use. And you really can't get around that kind of stuff. And now there's if you even go to the next slide, there's whole like new industries, new products around, the actual like dedicated GPTs just for bad people, right? So like we could go to like Worm GPT, and Thomas, you and Brandon, you know a lot about these kind of things, but like explain the concept behind like Worm GPT or a Fraud GPT.
Yeah, I mean, one of the common things, some examples that might be relatable would be Fraud GPT, for example. AI can help with the automation of fake identities, impersonating legitimate businesses or people. They could do things like creating a volume of fake reviews or testimonials, let's say, for a fraudulent product or service. And you as a consumer may fall for these because AI has given these reviews and testimonials, made them seem real. I mean, on the Worm side, the scalability at which it operates really enhances the phishing campaigns. There's a lot that, once again, to unpack with both of these areas.
Yeah, and the thing with these AI models is that, kind of once they're out of the box, they're not going back in, and so these tools now are out there that are at the hands of people that are very sophisticated nation state actors, sure, but also like just troubled high school kids. Like again, the barrier of entry now is become so much lower for the people who can attack you and cause you serious harm. Now on the flip side, and I think a nice segue into our next slide, there's a lot of things we can do, in a lot of ways we can use AI now and to battle that and to even get ahead of that. So if you want to maybe give us an idea, Thomas.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I always I heard this one a couple of years ago, and I always like it. It's like, Shrek famously compares ogres to onions because he says they have layers. It's very similar in cybersecurity. It's all about layers of defense. And just like an onion, in cybersecurity, you have multiple layers of protection, like firewalls, encryption, multi-factor authentication, whatever it may be. But the more layers you have, the harder it is for a cybersecurity attack to penetrate your defenses. So battling AI, it's definitely layers is a big thing, but it's also good to be proactive. I see on here, security awareness is a big thing that a lot of companies are doing now, just to continuously train staff to be prepared for, phishing attempts, which are the most, common way to infiltrate a environment nowadays. So simulated attempts and yeah, I know at Axelis is something you guys work with to inform clients about as well. So absolutely many ways to battle it, but it's definitely a layered approach.
Yeah, and I would say that like one of the other things about security awareness is, and to kind of throw you for a loop here a little bit, like the use of AI also allows hackers to gain critical information, and then they use it for something that's not AI at all. So like if like if you're looking for a way to get around like somebody's multi-factor authentication, and you can figure out who the phone number is behind that prompt, then what you see is a lot of people actually picking up an actual phone, a live person, calling that person and saying, "Hey, I'm from your IT department," or, your boss asked me to get that code from you. 99% of the time, that individual will just give it right to them, and then boom, they're in. But they didn't break in; they got in legitimately. So at that point, once they get into your machine, then what do you do if they start scripts are created, uh, ransomware is being injected into that machine? That's where you can't just rely on the old tools and I wouldn't even say old tools. You still need multi-factor authentication, but it's not the end all be all anymore. There are other ways around it.
Absolutely. And I mean, moving along here, one thing that we're seeing is, generative AI can ultimately help us stay ahead of these attacks, whether it's by automatically helping in detecting patterns and behavior faster. That's something I'll get into how our XDR is leveraging that. From initial account takeover to network compromises, there's a lot we can look at. But I think for sake of time, I'll move ahead and really get into what a big focus is from I would say from a consulting lens. What Axelis does day in and day out is trying to instill that cyber hygiene. Just as personal hygiene involves routine practices around keeping hygiene. It's the same thing on the cybersecurity side, where there's a lot of actions you need to take to maintain what we would say in today's world in 2025 is good cyber hygiene. And the next slide kind of goes over what that is. So it's, ultimately identifying what you need to protect, the critical systems, the processes that are unique to your business. Step 2 is kind of layering defenses around those valuable assets. So putting things in place to protect it. Step 3 is detection, and that's a big gap that we're seeing when I talk to, whether it be customers of the SMB side or even, higher on the mid-market side. It's a lot of people have a gap in the actual detection. They don't know what they don't know, so they don't know, threats that may be living dormant in their machines because they don't have a proper solution in place. So XDR comes in to fill that gap of detecting and responding. So on the response side, we've got a 24/7 team that's really able to, when threats arise, take action and remediate things right away, such as isolating a host device from the network. I'll get into in a later slide another example on the cloud side, but yeah, over to you.
I'll interject here too for a second, and I'm going to actually take control because I want to flip through a slide or two. But this is kind of the most critical slide, and I know we only have about like 3 minutes left, but before we hand this off to Gerald, but what you're looking at here is the NIST framework, and that's like the central kernel of all the other ones. You could map them down to this, all the really strict ones, CMMC and DFARS and all these different things. You could really logically map them down to NIST, and NIST is saying, hey, you have 5 different pillars to think about. And when we think about the rise of AI as a challenge to your businesses, your challenge is almost exclusively with this detect and respond pillars. Your ability to, if you can't understand that attack has happened for a couple of hours, couple of days, or worse, for most businesses, a couple of months, that's where they do the damage. But if you are able to detect that and respond within a couple of minutes or an hour or two, no damage, no harm, no foul, no need to notify any of your clients, no need to deal with wire fraud and gift cards and all those different things. And the reason it really matters in Ohio is because Ohio is a really cool state. We're ahead of the curve in a lot of ways. And one of the things is, if you don't know about, is Safe Harbor with Ohio Senate Bill 220. If you adopt a standard like NIST, and by the way, you don't have have to actually spend any, there's no certification for NIST. I have to go through this whole rigorous process. No, you have to just show that you made a good faith effort towards these 5 pillars. I'm not the lawyer, so you check with your lawyers. But if you adopt NIST CSF, and if specifically, if you can take care of this detect and respond pillars, not only will you keep yourself safe and prevent the attacks, but then you could minimize your exposure to lawsuits by having something of like an affirmative defense. And so, if we wanted to kind of give you an idea of what's that best thing you can do to cover these 2 pillars, look no further than a product like Barracuda XDR. Axcelis, we're independent. We work with a handful of cybersecurity companies. Almost all of our customers have Barracuda XDR because it's perfect in the mid-market space and it checks all the boxes and it's very cost effective. But what XDR does is extended detection and response is it covers these pillars. It protects your assets on the one side because it can isolate a machine that's infected in the middle of the night. It improves detection because it's a full environment logging. So even when the hacker wipes their tracks, there's copies of those logs off site. And then it increases that ability to respond in a very rapid manner so that we can clean it up before they actually extract any resources from you, money from you, data from you, make you have to notify your clients. Thomas, again, we have about like a minute here before we hand this off to Gerald. Any kind of remarks on XDR to help people understand, hey, how does a product like, this combination of SOC, SIM, full environment logging, how does it help the average small business here in Cleveland that wants to prevent attacks, but then also mitigate attacks when they do happen?
Yeah, I would say that given that we're leveraging things like AI in, to soften it down in a good way. And we're doing things like we're detecting threats that you wouldn't otherwise be able to detect. And by detecting those, we're then taking action on them right away. I think the best way for you guys, anyone on the call interested, would be to work with Axcelis, and in tandem with us, we're happy to get on a demo and kind of get a bit more into the weeds of it, because we don't have too much time here, but one thing to focus on here is just really how attackers live dormant in your environment if you don't have an XDR solution. So, earlier Brandon hit the nail on the head about an example where, someone was in there and they wired the bank, the bank funds incorrectly because they were learning about that environment. So with our case, we would have, as you can see on the next slide, actually, I believe, it'll actually, we could detect things because it's not there, but we would detect things such as suspicious logins, impossible travel. So let's say a user signed in from Moscow, Russia, and they don't normally do that. We would instantly be able to say, hey, this was not a normal login. Without a tool like this, you wouldn't know someone had access to forwarding rules in your email, looking in your email, and they may sit there for a year, to Brandon's point earlier, learn about you, learn about your vendors, who you pay invoices to, and then from there, strike when at the right time and ultimately, cause your business a lot of financial harm. So yeah, I would just end it with, we would absolutely love to show anyone a demo, and we'd work with Axcelis to set that up.
Yeah, exactly. And I'll hand this over to you, Gerald, and I know we're a couple minutes behind, sorry. But again, if I were to kind of try to summarize this into a picture, just you have to think about those 5 different pillars and your ability to detect an attack and respond to an attack. And products like Barracuda can really solve that. And hey, just you need something. So it doesn't have to be Barracuda. You have a security vendor you trust, great. Go with them, talk to them about these kind of solutions, because as a small business, whether you're 2 users or 200 users or 2,000 users, you really do need to understand how you're gonna solve those things. And by the way, then you can qualify under Safe Harbor. So Axcelis does offer a threat scan for you for free. But obviously, if you just wanted to even look at the XDR pricing, that is something that we would love to just get you hey, here's what it looks like. I'll tell you right now, it is very cost effective. Like the cost for protection is invariably so much cheaper than going without it. And it used to be a very expensive proposition. That is not the case anymore. So, Gerald, let me hand it over to you. This is a perfect kind of segue into the other side of it. Like Gerald always says, and we say it as well, your first line of defense is a company like Excelis, like Barracuda consults with you and hardens the environment. But boy, obviously, the last line of defense is Gerald and making sure you have adequate protections and things like that. So Gerald,
Mike,
sorry
you
we're running a little
you
late.
just stole my thunder, man. That's my line, not your line, but
I
you're
know
welcome
I
to
saw
use it.
that. Yeah.
I'm just sitting here listening to you guys, and I'm sure the attendees would agree. I'm glad that we didn't present this back in October, around Halloween time, because this adds a whole new level of spookiness. You guys are scaring me. You don't even have costumes on. So, but you're right. You're right. How do you protect yourself? And again, I'm going to throw it out because it's my line. You can steal it, you can use it, but insurance has to be your last line of defense. We never want to count on insurance to be our real upfront measure, because I think, Brandon, you shared a story about a client of yours that got hacked and they voluntarily sent money and their cyber insured didn't pay. So your front line of defense is the most important thing you got going for you. So you've got to use companies like Excelis to help you with that. So we want to talk now about the do's and don'ts of cyber insurance. And I want to go over a couple of these with you. There are a few ways you can buy cyber insurance. Most carriers add cyber insurance to the general liability, to the property policy, to what we call that package policy or the business owner's policy. Why do insurers do that? I mean, they quote it that way. I can request them to take it off, but they always quote it that way. The reason they quote it that way is that is protection for them. Think about it. They're putting out a little sampling of coverage. In a lot of cases, it's 50,000, as you see in the add-on column there. But cyber extortion is limited to 10,000. Data recreation is limited to 5,000. Loss of business income is limited to 25,000. The insurer would rather take a hit on a small amount than to not include the coverage at all and have some litigation lawyer try and go through the back door and use some other kind of wording that doesn't even apply, but the courts feel bad for this client who's been hacked, so they just make things up and find ways to pay coverage, to force the insurers to pay coverage. So insurers throw on a little bit of coverage with the intention of, this is all we'll ever pay, and they charge enough on that they're making money. But that's not the correct way to buy cyber. There are cyber insurers that specialize in putting together the right coverage. We can get on a standalone specialty cyber insurer limits of $1 million up to 5 million. We can layer it and get up to 10 million or 20 million. We can get cyber extortion just in the base policy with $1 million limit of anywhere from 250,000 up to $1 million. We can get data recreation with full limits, and we can get business income loss in full limits. So you have a lot better options when we're dealing with a carrier that specializes in cyber. Plus, they have the resources and the tools to crawl through your system and do what's called a penetration test or pen test up front, which, as my friends at Excelis would tell you, that's even not enough. That's just an external poke into your system. Excelis gets into the system itself behind the curtain and does all kinds of checks on your systems to make sure they're working. So,
Gerald, can I throw in one
yes.
note too on that previous slide?
Yep.
Can you go back one?
Let me back up. Sure.
That add-on cyber, those amounts there, that's scandalous. That's
It
nowhere
is.
near enough. That's nowhere near. That would never protect. $5,000 for data recreation. That's for the kickoff call.
Yeah.
That's for the kickoff call. That's not for data recreation. So it is nowhere near the kind of protection. That's not protection. So.
Well, and
I've
again,
just seen it a million times.
but-
I've been in Excelis for 15 years. Brandon's been in the business for 25 years. Same thing with Thomas. Guys, that's nowhere near enough.
And again, all the insurers are trying to do by throwing this on is not give you any level of real protection. They're trying to limit their liability. So this is the wrong. Let me go back to this slide. This is a don't. Do not accept cyber slapped onto your commercial package policy. do, as the second part says, buy a standalone policy through an insurer that specializes in cyber.
And just to add on that is like I've been a part of so many of my customers, and these are relationships for us. I mean, these are our partners. So we feel the pain when they feel the pain. And I will tell you that when they do these add-ons and these riders, and if it's really cheap, it probably is too good to be true. And it might make you feel a little bit better if you see cyber and you sleep better at night. But at the end of the day, I've seen it so often not pay, and and or you have to go through an extensive 1 year fight with your insurance company, and it exhausts everybody involved. That's why we got together with Gerald, because we needed to find somebody in our arsenal that we could trust, that knows cyber insurance, because there's not a lot of insurance companies out there that truly know it. They just, they're used to doing the home and the auto, and insurance just kind of smacked everybody in the face. So you have to be really equipped and really knowledgeable on it.
Yeah, absolutely. So a couple things that a cyber specialty insurer will give you. This is that standalone policy, covers for reputational harm. Your business could take a real hit reputational wise if it gets hacked, if data gets out, if their clients get the systems locked up through ransomware. I had one client years ago. He got a request for $400,000. He was a hoster of websites, so he had a bunch of different companies that now can't get their clients to their websites that they've worked real hard to drive traffic to, so they could generate new business. So I want to talk about computer fraud, funds transfer fraud, and social engineering. These are our 3 fraud coverages that are in there. Computer fraud and funds transfer fraud. And I've got a slide coming up next that explains each of these 3 and gives you the definition. But social engineering is the one that I really want to key on today. That's that fraudulent wiring instruction. And I don't know who came up with the term social engineering, but they ought to just call it wire fraud, in my opinion. I think that would make a whole lot more sense. But this is when they're trying to trick you, when they're trying to imitate somebody else. I've seen gift cards sent out, or someone scams you into buying gift cards and spending money, and somehow it ends up in their pocket. I don't remember the exact situation, but I've seen wire transfers that have gone awry. Definitely have seen the ransomware attacks. So let me give you one real quick. Oh, and sorry, let me keep going with this. Then there's media liability. This used to be called publishing liability. Someone publishes a magazine, someone slanders or maligns someone in the magazine, and then they end up getting sued. Well, since internet has arrived on the scene, all of our publishing is generally done on websites. So the cyber insurers responded to that with media liability. This is all forms of media liability, whether it's print, whether it's out on the internet, but most of it ends up on the internet. So that's a very important function of a cyber policy that's been integrated into there. Let's talk about, I need to move my slide so I can get to the next one. There we go. These are and we'll send this out to you later, but these are the various types or definitions of fraud. There's computer fraud, is right in the middle of your screen, underlined. There's funds transfer fraud, and there at the bottom is social engineering fraud. I had a situation a little over a year ago where I needed to go to the bank and have some money wire transferred. So I had the party that was receiving the money, or going to receive the money, wire or email me instructions. So they emailed the instructions to me, thinking about cyber, thinking about extortion claims and social engineering claims. I go to the bank and I bring my sheet from the receiver that came through email. I'm thinking in my brain, this could be fraudulent. The original set that came across could have been intercepted. They could have slid a new one in there. That's how it happens. So I go to the bank and I says to the banker, I need you to wire transfer money, but I want you to do a little call verification first. So what does the banker do? She takes my sheet of paper that was just emailed to me, and she starts dialing the phone number that's on that sheet. Now, in my mind, I'm thinking, what are you doing? And I think I even asked her, I go, what are you doing? She goes, well, I'm calling the number on the email. I go, if that email is fraudulent, do you think that number is going to be legitimate? So I grabbed my cell phone and I looked up the public record number and I called them and I said, listen, I'm getting ready to wire transfer you some money. I'm going to give you an account number. You tell me whose name is on that account number. And I gave him the account number and we got it verified. And I said, okay, now go ahead and wire the money. You got to be careful. Even our bankers don't get it. Now, that's all been changed. There are a lot of layering on the verification on the front end that the banker has to do. A lot of times they'll have codes that they'll send you on your cell phone to verify it's even you to start with, and they'll verify it on the other end. So scary stuff out there. There are several things that you need to be aware of if you're involved in trying to set up insurance. You know, what are the limitations of the penetration testing, right? We talked about that briefly. It's not just, are they going to poke you from the outside and can they get through, but Axcelis can get behind the curtain and figure out exactly what's going on inside your systems. What kind of response services are available? I had a client call me. He has a very reputable business in downtown Cleveland. I'm not going to go into what he does because I might give away who it is, but he called me in a panic on a Monday morning. Gerald, the FBI's here. I got the blue screen of death. They're asking for Bitcoin. I can't get into any of my systems. The FBI is telling me I've got to call this number and get a remediation specialist out here. He said they want 25 grand minimum. I said, John, excuse me. I said, don't call that number. I'll get somebody on the phone from the insurance carrier. We're going to get in touch with you immediately. So put us into action. We got him in touch. That was a service that was available from the insurer as part of his coverage. Boom, he just saves 25 grand right there. We did resolve the claim. It got settled. So thankful for that. I want to go down to retroactive date or continuity dates. This is very important. When you first sign up for cyber insurance, there will be an initial start date. The initial continuity date or retroactive date will be the date the coverage starts. The insurer does not want to pay anything prior to that incident or prior to the start date of that policy that may have occurred. If you change insurers, you have to make sure you maintain that original retroactive date. Otherwise, you've given up coverage prior to any actions prior to the start of the new insurance. But if you roll that retroactive date back to the original date, maybe it's a year ago, maybe it's 2 or 3 or 5 years ago, then you now have coverage for corrupt acts that have been perpetrated against you going back 1, 3, 5 years, whatever that date is. So that's a very important date that you have to keep in mind if you're switching insurers. Some insurers also do provide some ongoing monitoring services. But what I want to wrap up on is the human element. Axcelis can do all that they do for you, protect your systems, but it's the human element that'll still bite you every time if your people aren't trained. Right, Michael, Brandon?
100%.
That's correct.
So the next slide I want to go over is how do you really protect yourself when you're dealing with doing a wire transfer, when you're dealing with doing an ACH transfer. Most of the fraudulent wiring that occurs happens because someone is in a panic. They're being pressed by their vendors or their customers to act immediately, and they don't have a thought out plan in advance of who they're going to call if something occurs. So what I'm giving you here is a tool, and you'll get this sent out. You may be able to enlarge this on your screen, but we sent out the slide deck to you. We'll include all this. So this is a little something we've created. If you look in the green to the left, this is the vendor advanced authorization and approval for outbound wire transfers. What you want to do is establish who are the businesses that you deal with up front. You want to put that relational information down for the business name. Who's the authorized person that you talk to at that business every single time? You should have a predetermined PIN code. This is just some kind of identifier between you and them that you know you're speaking to the right person. What's the phone number you're going to call? Back to my wire transfer with my banker that I handed them. They didn't have any of this stuff thought out. They were just going to call off of the email that I got that I handed her, which could have been fraudulent. Who's the email? What is the email address of the person that you've established at a company? So let's say you're dealing with XYZ company. In XYZ company, you always talk to Mary Sue. That would be your authorized person. With Mary Sue, perhaps you sit down and you say, hey, we're going to use your date of birth as our PIN code. So you both know, if I call you and you're going to ask me for a wire transfer, I'm going to call you. I'm going to make sure I got you on the phone by you repeating your date of birth. I'm going to call her on a predetermined phone number. Maybe I want to shoot her an email to get her on the phone, but this is all stuff you have to determine in advance. Then when we're getting ready to send the outbound wire information, we want to know what's the amount of the transfer, what date was it requested, what routing number am I going to send this to, what account number. Again, these might be things you have determined in advance. Who is it that's going to send the money out? So this would ideally be your name and the date and the time, and then who's going to authorize it. Whoever's going to authorize this is going to want to see all of this information to make sure you're following proper protocol. So again, this is all about establishing proper protocol, making sure that you are not in a panic situation when you're sending it out, but that you have a plan of how you're going to verify that the person who's emailing you is a legitimate person on the other end that you have an established relationship with. Gentlemen, that's all I have. I think I want to open the rest up for questions, and I'll turn it back over to Jen. See if you have any questions.
We do have some questions. I had some that were emailed to me that I threw in the chat, and we have some that were added. And if anybody else has questions that you haven't added yet, now is the time to put your questions into the Q&A. And then I don't know if you guys have access to see the Q&A, or if you want me just to start at the top and start reading through. We can do either. Let's see here.
I was going to say, why don't you read the first one? And
yeah. So what challenges do, and this is probably more a question for the guys at Axelis and Barracuda, what challenges do companies face in meeting, well, no, maybe this is a Gerald question, in meeting cyber insurance requirements, and how can these be addressed?
So
what challenges do companies face in meeting these cyber insurance requirements?
Well, the big challenge is MFA. Everybody wants to know if you've got multi-factor authentication, some secondary method. I actually received a call from a prospective client who said, look, I'm kind of in a fight with management. I'm the IT guy. I want to make sure that we're doing the right thing. And I said, look, best thing I can do is just walk you through an application. I'll email it to you. We'll talk through everything. What the insurers are asking on the application is what they see as the big risk factors. And the big risk factors are the things that IT should be addressing to make sure your systems are in place and are solid. So I would say if somebody has a question in particular, reach out to me. I'll send you an application. Take a look over it. Talk with Axelis. make sure you got everything in place.
Yeah. No, just to add on to that, really you look at the 5 pillars of NIST, and that's going to give you a darn good idea of what insurers are going to begin to want to see. Smattering of coverages, Brandon, you see it all the time, the different kind of questionnaires as well. MFA obviously is a big one. That's your multi-factor authentication, but they get increasingly, sophisticated up, things like logging. Like if you do not have the ability to produce logs, if the hacker just wiped them out, that's going to present some real challenges for you. Brandon, any kind of sage words?
Yeah, I mean, if you think about it, these get harder every year. And they can become challenging for people. I guess a company like us, it can become a tipping point for people to actually go with some of the things we're recommending, because this is, they have to do it at that point. But I will say that, like, it's looking at things that they know are the problems. It's like external logging. A couple years ago, that wouldn't have been on there. But now I'm starting to see it on there, but it makes sense. Why would an insurance company want to cover somebody that got hacked and they have no trace of it and they don't know if they're gone? And then you're asking me to go do it again, and we don't know how it happened the first time. So, it makes a lot of sense. Email security. The insurance companies know that email is 99% of all the attacks, is the source of it. So there's all those different things. So you're going to start seeing things like, what kind of XDR, what kind of SIM, SOC, those are going to be integrated into these insurance questionnaires. I can see it coming already. Multi-factor authentication 2 years ago, 3 years ago. That's the thing. Hey, mate, you really should have that. Now we won't even take on a customer that doesn't have it. And you can't get insurance without it. There's no way. So, those things just start to evolve, and the insurance company is just mirroring what they see and what they have to pay out on continuously for small and big companies.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. Michael, you mentioned NIST. One of the questions is, how does compliance with NIST standards protect businesses from lawsuits related to data breaches?
Yeah, the big thing is that if you work towards NIST, according to the language of Senate Bill 220, you qualify for safe harbor. And you really do want to pass that by your lawyers and see exactly how far do you have to work towards it. But the reason why Ohio does that is that they want businesses to just be proactive. And when you work towards NIST CSF, you have 2 things that you can really hang your hat on. The first is, like, you literally will be safer. Like, the attack won't be successful, right? But then on the other side, you do, it limits the actual law will limit through an affirmative defense people's ability to have certain kind of classic tort come after you. Say, oh, now you should be liable because you got breached and that affected my business. Wait a second, we work towards NIST CSF, and so we're safe under Senate Bill 220.
Thank you. Another question. Can you guys share an example of successful deployments where Axcelis has eliminated IT chaos for clients? Being in operations at McMichael, I understand IT chaos. So what would you say is an example of a successful deployment where that was eliminated for the clients?
Yeah, we see every couple of weeks, we will see some kind of attack succeed. You have to assume that the attack is going to succeed for you. So we want to protect against as many of those as possible. We want to eliminate as many as possible, but you have to operate under the assumption that there will be a successful attack. And so what good looks like is you quickly get in and neutralize that threat. So we've seen it so many times where you have a product like Barracuda XDR in, and within 30 minutes, our security desk is already working on, it's locked the account, it's logged out of all sessions, it has rotated the passwords, and it's begun to go to Barracuda and look through the logs to understand where did the attacker come in and how far did they go. And very quickly then, and again, it's not just Barracuda. There's other people in the market. There's, Cato and, Agile Blue and Arctic Wolf, and there are different solutions providers. We like Barracuda for a reason, and we invited Barracuda to this call for a reason. In the small business space, they're the leader. But yeah, Brandon, you see it. Unfortunately, we get that call, a panicked call. I got one a week and a half ago. Me and Brandon were in Phoenix for an IT show, and one of our good clients in California called in a panic. Mike, we got this message. I've seen the image. The message was, hey, we have 5 terabytes of sensitive data on minors, medical records. It was a law firm, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You have 3 days to start negotiating. Don't call law enforcement, or we're going to post this to all your competitors. We're going to post it online, blah, blah, blah. And they were deep in there. And luckily, we were able to get them out, but that firm didn't have an XDR solution in there, and that hacker had been in there since November 19th. So they were had plenty of time to extract the 5 terabytes. And so while the hacker's out of the system, they do have 5 terabytes of legitimately important data. Brandon,
I would say like the key thing is there's no eliminating the chaos if it's after the fact. The only way that you eliminate the chaos is if you get in ahead of the game and you set the proper foundation. That's hygiene, that's detect and response. A lot of people have the hygiene, they put their tools in place and they let them ride. But if you don't have somebody watching those 24/7, if you don't have that detect and response part in there, then you're just waiting on symptoms when something occurs. By the time you get symptoms, chaos is there. So really the key is, how do you set somebody up to be truly set up for success and to avoid those kind of chaotic circumstances.
And for especially if you're just a couple users, I'm talking like $100 a month, $200 a month gets you the kind of protections you need. It is not much money anymore. Thomas, I cut you off. What, any sage
No,
words?
I was just going to say, I can see even the next couple of questions are around that same theme. And it's like, with implementation of AI, are there specific things you should be on the lookout for? Of course, there's all the traditional things like spelling errors and such, but nowadays it's really having something in place is what you should be looking out for. A lot of it you can't do. No human has the ability to look out for, hey, was a forwarding rule added to my email? Was this, did this happen? You really need the tools in place is what it really comes down to, and following that cybersecurity hygiene. So just wanted to illustrate that, because it looks like the next few questions that really answers them is about having that,
it's too large of a world to have just for human eyes. You're talking millions of pieces of data, tens of thousands of alerts generated in a month in a small business of 5 users, 10 users, 15 users, let alone then 100, 150, 200, 500. And so you need AI to be able to pull all that data together from all these different sources, by the way, all the different logs, firewalls, endpoints, servers, all the different alerts produced by, say, Microsoft 365 and other cloud platforms. They centralize that data, and then they use AI. Just if any of you have used ChatGPT to see how powerful it is to, plan a trip to Rome or write an email to an old friend, like we can use that same power to go through millions of records in real time and find things that you never would have had a hope. Even our team, we would never have had a hope 5 years ago without that kind of powerful tool to find stuff that we can now find today quickly before it causes you negative harm.
Awesome. And Thomas, you're right. The last question that I have in here is, how do I know if I'm secure? And you guys have already touched on that. And, we can kind of wrap it up if you guys have anything specific. And I know we've talked about it here in the last few minutes about just having the right processes and products and procedures in place to protect yourself. And knowing if you're secure, that can be from a technology standpoint and from an insurance standpoint. So I'm just going to open up the floor to the 4 of you if you guys want to kind of give your closing remarks, and then we'll be off and running.
Yeah, I can start. I mean, I would just close it with, our power is, using AI to look for anomalies in your environment that you wouldn't otherwise be able to look for. So I would implore anyone on the call that doesn't have protection in place to reach out to Axelis, and I'd love to walk you guys through a call and a demo of really how we can help you out. So
I'll second that too. We work with people every day, and sometimes we consult with them for a year or two before we actually ever do business with you. We'd love to just have that conversation with you. We do offer that free threat scan where we can scan your environment and look for active ongoing attacks. We can look in the inbox and see what kind of latent attacks are in there. We could actually use that tool to clean your inbox. But I think that's a good starting place. If you don't know where to start, if you don't really have a good security partner in place, or you're just unsure about your cybersecurity footprint, who knows? Maybe you're actually doing pretty good. A company like ours, we're always happy, especially with Gerald's client. Gerald knows most of our clients, and we know tons of Gerald's clients because we're just always looking to have a good partnership with people we can trust. And so, yeah, we'd love to be able to just consult with you. And also, like I said, the cost of protection, this is not $1,000 a month, $5,000 a month, $10,000 a month anymore. For small businesses, you could get protection for $50 a month and escalate that level of protection up there. So, Brandon, quick remarks. You deal with it every day. You put these solutions in for people of all sizes, from literally 2-3 employees all the way up to 750 employees, 1,000 employees. Any thoughts?
I would say you might be surprised how easy and cost effective it really is to make a considerable amount of progress in it. I mean, there are some complex things, but for the most part, let's at least start with the key things that can make a big difference. And then consulting with somebody like Gerald on that too. Like, Gerald sees this stuff all the time. He sees the path, and he sees what's going on as far as the direction, because the insurance people are security experts too. They're ethical hackers, they're security CISOs and experts. They're all built into the insurance companies, and they're the ones that are telling them, you guys need to watch out for this. So they know what they're talking about when they're asking you those questions and what needs to be in place.
Well, and I would just add to that, don't settle for one of these slapped on cyber policies. Get insurance through a carrier that specializes in cyber. They're almost always handled on a standalone basis. And I would also say, you don't want to have to use your insurance. You absolutely don't. I've seen businesses taken out by tornadoes. I've seen fires take out homes. I've seen businesses devastated by extortion claims and cyber hacking and fraudulent wiring claims. You don't want to have to deal with that. By the time you get hit with that, your business is in extreme turmoil. Your lost opportunity costs are off the chart. Now you can't focus on running your business and generating revenue. Do the smart thing. Get involved with me. Get involved with my team. They're experts in this stuff. Get involved with Excelis. Get the proper protections in place. It doesn't cost you a whole lot of money to do it. But man, the expense on the backside will cost you tens and tens and tens of thousands of dollars, if not 6 digits. So it's worth it to be proactive up front.
Awesome. You guys, thank you so much. Thank you for everyone who's joined us today. Gerald, Michael, Brandon, Thomas. Thank you for the expertise that you brought to us today, the knowledge. This is really invaluable. We all need to take this very seriously. We are in a new age of technology. So
yeah, let me just say, keep your eyes open on your email inbox for future events of Value Beyond Insurance. Thank you for joining us.
Yes,
Thanks,
and we
everyone.
will be sending out this recording. Once it's finalized, we'll send out the recording. I'll also send out a PDF version of our slide presentation, so you guys will have that for future reference as well. And if anyone has any questions, please do not hesitate to reach out. All the contact information for all the companies involved in our presentation today will be included in that PDF file that's going to be coming out to you by tomorrow. All right. Thank you, everyone, so much.
Everyone.
We appreciate it.
Wonderful.
Thanks.
Thanks, everyone.
Take care.
You guys.
Bye.
Bye now.